Welcome in to the Player's Perspective Uncensored. I am your host, Larry O'Bannon. Man, got a special guest in the building today. All-American volleyball player, national team, professional, amazing race winner, ESPN analyst, and a ton of accolades that you probably don't even know that she's got under her belt. And she's a U of L alum. What makes it the best part? Jen Hoffman.
What's
Jen
up,
Hoffman
friend?
Fowler. Excuse me, Jen Hoffman Fowler. Welcome to the
We don't have
podcast.
we don't have it
Welcome to the
hyphenated,
podcast.
but I know. Thank you for having me. I mean, we've been friends way back to the U of L days, so love to see what you're doing and all the guests. So I'm honored. I'm honored.
Well,
So,
it's a pleasure to have you on, man. It's a pleasure to have you on. So, first and foremost, we always ask our guests, are you a bourbon drinker? Do you partake in bourbon? And if so, what's one of your go-tos? What's your favorite?
oh, absolutely. So I'm originally from Chicago. So I came into bourbon country, came to Louisville, and I started maybe several years ago really, really enjoying bourbon. Someone taught me how to taste bourbon. So ever since then, I have been able to really catch the tannins, really catch the oak. So I love bourbon. My old fashioned, it has to be a little bit sweet. But my top three bourbons, I always tell people, because again, tons of bourbons around here, but it's Blanton's, it's Bullet, and I like a Weller's, but gotta stick with Woodford as my third. So all others, I'll try it, but those three are my top.
I'm not mad at that. I'm not mad at
Yep.
that. Well,
Yep.
let's dive into the podcast. And so,
Yeah.
U of L, we're both U of L alumni. What made you choose Louisville? What made you, travel down the road from Chicago? Because you could have easily went to Illinois. You could have went to DePaul, or some other Midwestern schools. What made you go south and choose the University of Louisville?
So I have a very interesting story because back then, this was 2002. I was a senior I was a three-sport athlete from Chicago, all girls school. So it's not very prominent like it is here in Louisville, the top girls, all female school. So I was three sport athlete kind of to stay out of trouble. So I caught on to volleyball, and then from volleyball I went to basketball. Basketball I ran track. And so top athlete in all three sports, but basketball was really my jam. That was really my bread and butter. That's what I traveled with. I played for Blue Island, Lady Rockets, which it could be familiar. Dwayne Wade, I used to play against him because he used to practice with us. So I was heavy, heavy, heavy into basketball until I took my second recruiting trip, and it was actually to DePaul with legendary Doug Bruno. And I went into a practice and I sat with those girls, and I'm about a buck 60, about 5'11". I got a jump shot, so I was a small forward, I was a shooting guard. And these big, thick cornbread girls in the gym, I said, oh, that's not me. What am I gonna do? So, so my sister Lakeisha, she was heavy into basketball. She was at Western Illinois at the time. And I also knew that I didn't want to go to any space or any college that was like small town where it was only the school that was prominent there. So I'm a city girl, love really populated metropolitan places. So I looked at other spaces because I wanted to kind of branch out away from where I lived. So I went to that recruiting trip and I said, you know what? I don't know how I'm going to stack up in basketball, right? Because women's basketball was just getting more and more physical at the time. So I walked into my volleyball practice one day, haven't never picked up a volleyball, never played club. And one of my teammates said, have you ever thought about playing volleyball in college? No, never thought about playing volleyball in college. Absolutely not. So I took it upon myself because I was also getting heavily recruited by Martin Clapp for the University of Louisville at the time. So Martin Clapp, heavy recruiting me, but volleyball program at the University of Louisville was top tier as well. And I, again, knew nothing about volleyball. I just knew, how am I going to stack up with basketball? I need to figure something else out. So I signed up for camp randomly. And I signed the recruiting form online. And a lot of colleges and universities use it now. But I signed up, I filled it out, and Coach Leonard Yellen, who was the head coach at the University of Louisville at the time, he got my paper. He actually talked to Martin Clapp and said, how good of an athlete is she? Martin Clapp said she'll be better than her sister in 2 years. So Coach Leonard Yellen, they were actually playing DePaul in volleyball, Conference USA. He came to my basketball practice. He said, can you touch the net, the bottom of the net on the basketball rim? I was in basketball practice. So I was like, yeah. I dunked a volleyball and he offered me a scholarship in my student lounge.
Wow.
I didn't know. I didn't know I could dunk a volleyball. I just went up as though I was making a layup and I hung on the rim and he offered me a scholarship. He was like, you can't teach athleticism. And that was how I ended up at the University of Louisville playing volleyball. I knew nothing about volleyball. Absolutely nothing. And that was my story. That is how I trusted the coaches, because the other two, Rick Nold, who is now at Bellarmine as the head coach for volleyball, and Patty Dennison Norton was the other assistant coach. I trusted the coaches. I trusted the university, and I trusted my gut, because at the end of the day, you know what type of person you are, you know what type of athlete you are. And that essentially, when you're going on these recruiting trips, you have to get a sense and feel of how you're going to exist in this world, right?
Right.
And I immediately, they told me, don't say yes now, because obviously a 4-year scholarship is a big deal from a Chi-Town kid, for a Chi-Town kid. And so I took the recruiting visit. I met with the team. I got on campus, and I fell in love with it, because Louisville is Louisville. You come, you fall in love with it. The people were great, and the environment was where I needed to be. And I started in engineering school, which is one of the top engineering schools in the country at the time. So I started JB Speed School, and it checked all the boxes that I needed. So that's what brought me to Louisville.
Nice, nice. Well,
Yeah.
it turned out to be the best move because you went on to have a stellar career. You were All-American. You played professionally.
Yep.
I think you're in the U of F Hall of Fame. I know your jerseys in the. I know
My
your
jersey
jerseys in
is
the rafter.
somewhere. My
Yeah.
name is in several places in LNN, which was Cardinal Arena when I was playing, but now LNN. So yeah, I had a great career, but it was all because of the head coaches and the coaches that invested the time, that they saw the talent in me before I did. I mean, 18 years old, coming in as a freshman, not having played volleyball like some of my other teammates. And I just needed to trust the coaches. I needed to trust myself as well in the process. So,
Nice. So, what's your thoughts now? You've seen how you were a pillar in the volleyball community for the University of Louisville. You played for Coach Yellen. He retires.
yeah.
Danny Busboom Kelly steps in. She continues to thrive, takes it up another level. What's been your thoughts, and how has it made you feel to see the University of Louisville volleyball really kind of take off from where you started to see where it's at now?
I mean, I always like to say that we built the program, right? Because when we were there, it was still volleyball. It wasn't on this accelerated path like it is now. But the upward trajectory was there. We were a women's sport that was actually generating revenue, right? Not for the likes of Hawaii or Nebraska, but the University of Louisville made a name in women's athletics. And that was one of the reasons why you see all the banners when you go into the gym, and you're like, I want to be a part of a team that hangs banners, right?
Right.
Whether it's conferences, whether it's making history of going to the Sweet 16 for the university, you want to be a part of that. And so volleyball was a top tier women's sport here at the University of Louisville. But to see it just take a trajectory, just shoot up, it has been a remarkable feeling to still be here in Louisville. not necessarily as an alum, but really just a fan of the sport. I still coach volleyball, so I'm still up and coming in a lot of the trends that are happening right now. You know, you got NIL, you've got all of these male athletes that are shooting up, but now it's time to look at women's sports, right? Because everybody watches women's sports. That's not just the tagline, that is absolutely legit. And I think the trajectory of women's volleyball specifically, it took a tilt in COVID. If you remember, sports kind of stopped in COVID.
Life
And
stopped.
like legit, there were conferences, like everything was left up to the conferences, left up to the state. So there was this kind of chaos around just everything, right? And when everything shuts down, it's like, okay, do we have sports, right? Because at the end of the day, regardless of the differences that people may have, if you're sitting down watching your favorite team, like we're all rooting for somebody, right? And so when you look at how sports bridges that gap, women's volleyball was smack dab in the middle because 2019, women's volleyball runs in the fall. We've had our championship, we've had our season, and then COVID strikes, where COVID strikes and everything shuts down. So there's no sports. Pac-12 is saying, "Oh, we're going to shut down the whole shop. We're not going to run any sports for an entire year." Then you're looking at a lot of those football schools are like, "Okay, what are we going to do? No basketball," right? So it's like what are the decisions that are being made? So when the NCAA made that decision to give everybody a blanket year, extra year, volleyball had already played their season. So volleyball and all of the conferences and all of the heads for that sport specifically said, okay, let's turn it up a notch because volleyball also has a spring season, right? That's that where you try to get better, you're really pumping weight, you're really trying to see what is going to carry you into that next fall season. So the decision was made to televise volleyball because at the end of the day, you're divided by a net. You're already practicing because that's when some of the things had tapered off. You can still be in the gym. You still, like, there were athletes wearing masks playing at a high level, and it was all on television. And so I think when COVID happened and there was a dead period in sports, March and April, when volleyball started to make mainstream on television, that was the only sport that you watch. And that's where the fans came. And when you're seeing Kentucky win a national championship in 2020, it just takes off. Kentucky, part of the SEC. It's a beautiful sport to watch. Women are powerful, women are strong. And with the acceleration again of that happening, all eyes were on volleyball because nobody else was playing anything. And
Right.
people just love sports. So with that taking off, and then just the acceleration at the University of Louisville with Danny Busboom Kelly, she the way that she navigates just recruiting, the way that Dan Meskey navigates recruiting, just that whole staff really, really makes me a proud alum to understand like the game is moving. So how are you connecting with your athletes? And I think Danny does a beautiful job of that. And you can see it from, winning Sweet 16, going and beating Texas and making that run, and then just getting better and better year after year to now the expectation is if you're not making a Final Four, if you're not at least getting into the Elite Eight,
Right.
then what's a successful season to you, right? And that's
Right.
what I think Dan Meskey is going to have to define, right? Because he doesn't have Danny under his belt. So now he's got to make a name for himself. So very interested to see how he fares his first year as head coach. I'm super excited for him. But again, I'd like to say that the year 2020 was when volleyball specifically really accelerated and got into people's homes for sure.
Nice. Now,
Yeah.
after your volleyball career, next thing you know, we send Jen Hoffman and Lakeisha Hoffman on the Amazing Race.
Yeah.
So tell us about that opportunity, how it came about, and how that experience was.
Well, I mean, you know how it is. You're trying to figure out life when you're in your 20s. do you want to use your degree? You're not going back home because I wasn't necessarily going back home to Chicago. Because my network is here in Louisville, right? As a student athlete, you know just as well as anybody, once you're in a space where you're recognizable, where you bring success to the city, to the university, you're a household name, so to speak. Like your network is where you are and where you've been the last 4 years. So I wasn't going to go home to Chicago. So I stayed in Louisville trying to figure out my world. And so I got my degree, business marketing, and I said, you know what? I want to try my hand at actual marketing because marketing was sales and I didn't want to do sales. So I stuck around, and obviously around the Kentucky Derby, you've got all these parties. And so my friend Joey Wagner, he asked me to come man his VIP. And again, in my 20s, I'm like, yeah, I'll do whatever. What you want me to do? Sure. I'll go and check in people in VIP, right?
Right.
Because that's where you see all the celebrities. It's the Kentucky Derby. So there was this one night that this young lady from CBS, I didn't know she was from CBS at the time, but it's a really unfortunate story. I'm not going to tell the whole thing, but there was an emergency that happened that night in the VIP area, so I had to shut it down. Like we had to get the EMS in, had to shut it down. But there was this one woman from California who was just she was piss drunk. Do you know who I am? And I just shut her down immediately because again, I'm worried about the situation, the emergency that was happening.
Right.
So night goes on, and Joey's like, this woman has been harassing me about you, telling me that she needs to know who you are. Finds out it was someone from CBS for The Amazing Race and Survivor. So she was like, I just love how you handled that whole situation. And I'm like, lady, who are you? Like, what is happening? Right. And so it actually came at a great time in my life. Again, in your 20s, you're trying to figure out what kind of career move you're wanting to make. This was after I had come back from playing it in Spain. And I was like, you know what? I want to just sit still for a little bit. I wasn't going to go back overseas because volleyball, where I was playing, it wasn't active. Like you usually had the Italian leagues, you have the French leagues, but I was in Spain and I was like, you know what? I want to just go back home. I want some familiarity. So I stuck it out for a year here, and then this opportunity just came up, and she was like, we're going to do all these things. We're going to fly you out to California. You're going to meet with producers. And I was like, is it free? And she was like, yeah, we're going to take all it. And I flew to LA. My mother didn't know. My sister didn't know because I was originally cast for Survivor. And
Mhm.
so I was like, okay, how am I going to do with Survivor? Like, love the concept, love the strategy, but I can't lie. Like I can't pretend to be somebody that I'm not, right?
Right.
And so she was like, would you ever do the Amazing Race? And I was like, absolutely, travel the world doing competitions. Like, I'm a type A athlete. Like, absolutely, give me something that I need to start and finish and I'll be good, right?
Right.
And so that's how that happened. We said yes to the Amazing Race, and it was 30 days of nonstop travel our first season. We didn't know what to expect. We went all over the world, and I asked my sister because you have to do the pros and cons. I always tell this with my husband, like I would have never picked my husband if we were ever married or together. Absolutely not. But I chose my sister because at the end of the day, she was a collegiate athlete, D1 athlete. She understands and she can decompartmentalize what the task is, right? If you're on a team in any sense of the word, you have to collaborate, you have to understand your teammates pros and cons, strengths and weaknesses, and I think that me choosing my sister, that's just what that was. We know each other's strengths and weaknesses. We were raised by a single mom, so we had all this time together to just understand each other. Granted, we're 4 years apart, so we are very different people, but at
Right.
the end of the day, we can absolutely say, you know what, you're not good at this, And so maybe I can help with that. So I think we balance each other well. But everything in my 20s, I say yes to. Sure, why not? Sure, absolutely. Go for it. But now, I mean, it's afforded me so many different opportunities. So I still say yes selectively, but I also have the opportunity to say, you know what, that's not for me. And I think that because traveling the world, that helped me along the way for sure.
So the first time you went in 2014,
Mm-hmm. Crazy.
guys came up a little short. What
Yeah.
did you learn from the first time you went in 2014 when you came back in 2018? You guys are successful and you guys won the amazing race. What was the difference or what was the mindset that you took from that first experience?
It it's hard not knowing, right? As an athlete, knowing your sport, you know individually what you need to do to help your team succeed, right? You know your role on any team. But going into that first year, especially for me and my sister, there was some getting used to one another. Because granted, again, we grew up in the same household. We're 4 years apart. We had vastly different experiences
Right.
in our athletic careers, right? And so understanding that there was this grace period that we really had to dig deep. I've never lived with my sister. I hadn't lived with her since she left to college, right? So like there was a huge gap in between those years of reintroducing ourselves to these new adults, right?
Right.
Because as kids, we would just do whatever our mothers told us to do, right? But now I'm an adult, she's an adult. And so we had to really understand that we had to separate our differences and our levels of understanding because I deal with stress very differently than most people. My husband says I don't know how you can just travel through life and be like, it's okay, because I'm like, I always have this understanding that everything will work out, right? I have a praying mama, I'm blessed and highly favored, like everything's gonna work out. And so my sister didn't always have that mentality, so we approached conflict. We approached stresses differently. Like I was not a great swimmer. Absolutely not. In that first season, the whole world saw it, right? But the whole world also saw how compassionate my sister was toward that situation. So we had to learn each other. We had to take that level of understanding and apply it to such a stressful situation. So I think I learned a lot about my sister. I learned a lot about myself, like what I'm willing to tolerate, what I can tolerate. Because if you put an expectation in front of you as an athlete, you're going to find a way to succeed, right? You're gonna find a way to make sure that you check those boxes. And with the Amazing Race, it wasn't always like that, right? Because you're going in these high stressful situations, you're sleep deprived, you're hungry, you don't know the language in the country wherever you are, and then you have to compete, right? So you don't have that in everyday life. And my sister and I, what I learned most about us is that as Black women, as women, as just people, we can get through anything because we absolutely know that it's gonna be all right. Because my premise, especially on the show, when anything had to deal with swimming, they're not gonna let us die on national TV, are they? They absolutely are not gonna let us die on national TV. So it was always those kind of bring you back to reality. But then it was like, oh my God, my sister and I always had fun. First time we went and the second time we went, our mentality of having fun didn't change, right? Because not everybody can have that experience. So we made sure that we did not take that for granted at all. In the show, you didn't see us trying to win every race because the only one we had to win was the last one. We didn't need all them prizes. We didn't, as long as we were not the last on the mat, we still lived to fight another day. And I think that's the mentality that both my sister and I had.
I'll never forget when I was watching it and y'all was on that little bitty bike heading toward the finish line. He was trying to drag your sister on. He's like, I don't care what you got to do,
I don't
but you
care
better
what you
find
gotta
it and get to
do.
moving.
And when we watched it back, we actually laughed because she looked like Debo from Friday. because that was the longest bridge. It was somewhere in Florida. And I mean, when I tell you that win, again, I'm only a buck 60. That win was moving me back and I had to fight against it. Oh, it was treacherous. It was treacherous. But I mean, that was a very long ride. That was a very long bike ride. Whew, very long. But
Well,
we won.
man, we are so happy, man. I was so happy when I saw that you won that. But you kind of touched on it a little bit. What I want to transition to, and what I really want to talk about in this podcast is some of the opportunity that you got, and now you're ESPN analyst. You're in the sports media, and I have a lot of thoughts and really questions about this. So my first question is like, what was it like for you navigating just being a woman in the whole sports media space first? What was how was that when you first began and you got into that?
So navigating just sports in general as a female, as a black woman, sports media, there aren't a lot of people that look like me, right? You've got Taylor Rooks, she does a phenomenal job. You've got Maria Taylor, she does a phenomenal job. You've
Mm-hmm.
got plenty others, but in a prominent sport like women's volleyball, I mean, you've got Elle Duncan is absolutely one of my faves, right? But she does women's basketball. She takes that to another level, but there still aren't a lot of women, especially that are black and brown, that have these opportunities, right? I
Right.
only got an opportunity because a door was open for me from SID from the University of Louisville, right? So I needed help in getting into this space, and that's all that I'm ever forever grateful for, right? Because again, we all need help. And it's those people that are willing to help us through that journey that are clutch. So me getting into sports media, it wasn't it wasn't by chance, it wasn't an accident. It was something that I absolutely wanted to do. I transitioned out of coaching because I saw the change and I saw the trajectory of where women's sports was going even
Mhm.
in 2013, right? Volleyball maybe had 5 matches on television. So I knew I needed to get in on the ground up because the sport is just going to accelerate. Every sport is going to consistently accelerate, right? And so looking at it from that space, what helped me out was that I had a camera in my face for 60 days, being twice a participant on the Amazing Race. So I wasn't afraid to have a camera. I wasn't afraid to be on a mic. So those things helped me to transition well, but it's still not easy. How do you present when you're talking about a sport, right? And you do a little bit of that analyst part. That game moves fast. You do
It
it in men's
does.
basketball.
It
Women's
does.
volleyball moves faster than basketball. So how are you analyzing that sport? You have to be quick-witted. So not everybody can do it, and I wanted to have an opportunity to present myself as knowledgeable as anybody else because there's not a lot of black and brown women playing volleyball. And so I wanted to take up space. How am I going to take up space in a world that doesn't present to a lot of people like me, right? Like I told you, I was majority basketball.
Right.
Volleyball was not on my radar, right? So if I was going to get out of the hood, I was going to play basketball. If I was going to get a scholarship, I was going to play basketball. So the opportunity presented itself where, okay, here's another sport that I could also get a college scholarship in, right?
Right.
That hand that helped me do that was Coach Yellen, right? The success of my career at U of L brought me to be able to play professionally. I would have never thought that I had that opportunity. Again, people helping me along the way. Me playing for the USA national team, people helping me along the way. And so getting into sports media, I wanted to take up space because now I've had this trajectory of saying, you know what, I belong here, right? Predominant white female sport. I'm an athlete. I belong here. So I want to be able to have Girls, little girls that look like me, that look like my daughter, say they can play volleyball too. They can talk about volleyball, they're just as knowledgeable, right? And so the opportunity of being an analyst for a sport, I don't take that for granted. But it is still a hard space to get into because you have to have people that want to see you succeed. There's a lot of people that want to see you fail, but there is a lot of people that want to see you succeed. And I had to find those people, and those people are my village. I don't listen to trolls online. I don't listen to people that think they can do what we do as analysts because it's hard. You've got people in your ear, you've got producers, you're trying to watch the game, you're trying to listen to your play by play, making sure you don't talk over. There's a lot of things happening. So you
Yes,
have
it
to be
does.
quick in understanding and processing information and analyzing. And then, okay, and you maybe got 12 seconds to do all that. Not everybody can do that. I'm just wanting to make sure that I'm taking up space in a world where there's not a lot of people that look like me. And I think that I've done it successfully. And that is because I've had a ton of help and I've had a ton of people that believed in me. And I've had the people that believed in me put me in places like, hey, you want to do some studio? Yep. Yep. Let's do some studio. You want to do some sideline reporting? Yes. Okay, this is the opportunity where I can say yes. I still say yes again, but I still have the luxury of saying, you know what, that's not for me. I may not be. I'm not gonna. I'm not even gonna look that way. But
Right.
I know what to say yes to for sure. But I had a whole lot of help along the way.
So my next question to you, Jen, is being an analyst, like your job is to criticize, call the game how you see it. How do you do it in an authentic and genuine way, but at the same time, keep it respect and not really burn bridges with people that you know and respect in the game? Or is that part of the job that you just got to kind of live with?
I think there's a definite double standard between men and women's sports, right? And I think for men's sports, it is because they're revenue generating, right? So you see a lot of analysts have their opinions and without that, like they throw caution to the wind when they're talking about college athletes, male athletes. And I'm talking about football, I'm talking about basketball, and now here recently baseball. You've gotten some really heavy criticism about college athletes, right? And it's not just head coaches. Like you really get to listen to analysts have their opinions about these. I mean, we can say they're kids, but they're still adults, 18, 25, they're accelerating up to 27. But I think it's only because of so much money is put into men's sports that I think people think they have this right, this expectation to have some opinion about it, right? But it's not the same for women's sports, right? I have seen, I mean, I've been an analyst for going on 14 years, right? And I have seen with the growth and the acceleration of women's volleyball and women's basketball that women's basketball, not so much now, but you have to tread lightly, right? You have to be gentle, right, with women. You have to be gentle in the way that you criticize or provide your analytical insight, right? Because for lack of a better word, because we're female, right? We're emotional. I'm not emotional. You can ask my husband. I am black and white, straight to the point. I enjoy constructive criticism because I know the difference between somebody hating and somebody really offering me something that's going to help me succeed, right?
Mhm.
And so, being an analyst, I have found that more and more often, if I'm critical, I would have to apologize. I'd have to I'd have to reason, right, with those coaches, with those players. Um and I may not think that it was harsh, right? But with with the idea that women's sports, we're growing women's sports, there needs to be a level of kind of bringing people along with you. And I mean that in a way of saying you can critique Lamar Jackson when he was at U of L, he threw a bad pass. He made some incompletions. His completion percentage was terrible, right? You can actually hear analysts verbalizing that he was terrible. I can't do the same thing for athletes if they make a bad set or they didn't get a dig that they were supposed to get because I'm trying to grow the game. So I need to be a little bit softer to these athletes. I think it's switching because these athletes are making so much money, but there was a double standard when I started out as an analyst, and I think it was different because it was a female sport. There was a lot of explaining because people seem to not understand that women also play sports and we're actually pretty dang on good at it. So there was a lot of explaining, a lot of information, a lot of creating knowledgeable fans about what they were watching. You don't have to create knowledge or tell or explain somebody what football and what, line of scrimmage and that's a 10-yard pin. You don't have to explain that to fans. They already know and they're cussing out the refs for making the call that they should have made, right?
Right.
Same with men's basketball, but in women's sports, it's not the same. I think that women's basketball is changing because you're seeing a hell of a lot of criticism for some women's basketball players that are undeserving and some that are deserving, but you're seeing a lot more criticism because it's always about equity, right? If we want to have same pay, if we want to have the same treatment, then we should be able to hear the same critique and hear the same analytical insight of, you know what, you had a terrible game and we should be able to say that as analysts. But
Right.
in my earlier career, I think it was definitely, I think it was a double standard in the way that we treated female athletes as opposed to male athletes. But I think that gap is starting to narrow because people are also very, very interested in women's sports. So, yeah. But I mean, it was hard. It was hard to bite my tongue and it was hard to apologize for my analytical insight. Like if I have an opinion about something, like how am I not going to say that opinion because I am an analyst,
Right.
right?
Right.
You may not agree with it, but that doesn't mean that, I mean, I've gotten some hate mail. I mean, that's why I'm not on Twitter. That's why I'm not on a lot of social media because people feel the need to express their opinion about how I expressed my opinion. And that is just like that's weird to me. That's weird behavior. So I ignore it. I mean, I there are blogs. I'm sure one of my play-by-play short story, one of my play-by-play partners, they introduced me to this website that is basically a chat room about critics for volleyball critics. I don't know who these people are. I've never met these people. I'm like, why do you even look at this? It's literally like a Reddit forum of people just complaining. And right now, I don't have the bandwidth to hear complaining when I'm just constantly trying to find joy and find success and hype up. I have a great balance of critique and praise, and I'm just gonna stick with it. But there was definitely a double standard, and I mean, it was hard my first couple of years as an analyst for sure because it's huge. It's huge. Double standards are everywhere,
I think you
especially
have
in
I think the
sports.
most part is I think you have to be honest. I think there's
Yeah,
ways of going about criticism. And I think that people that are being criticized, players, coaches, and I think if they're honest with themselves, they understand when they hear certain things that
hmm
they know it's true. I think for the most part, when I was a player, athlete, I knew if I had a bad game, I didn't necessarily want to hear it, but I
yeah,
knew it. But I knew within myself what they were saying was right. And I just always liked it if it was in a respectable manner. And I think
for sure.
sometimes you hear people, they say it in like a joking manner for entertainment, or they take personal digs, or they just go too far with it. I think that's where you kind of get carried away. And I understand the entertainment, or now we're in the social media value of everything wanting to go viral or people wanting to
Yes.
have these catchphrases that people might put on shirts, or memes, or captions or whatnot. But I always liked it when things were respectable. And so I want to piggyback on a point that you were saying. You were talking about, being haters, and between people being hating and people giving constructive criticism. I want to talk about Angel Reese, and I want to talk about Caitlin Clark, because this this has been a whirlwind, and it really started with Caitlin Clark and Haley Van Lith with the you can't see me motion in my face.
It did.
And I didn't see any problem with it. I love women that are competitive. I love a little smack talk here and there, as long as it stays within the boundaries of it. Mm-hmm. But it seemed like things really got blew out of hand when Angel Reese entered the picture, and it became a thing of Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark. And so for the last 3 years, there's just been this narrative around Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. And, what's your thoughts on that? Being a former athlete, being an analyst now, because part of being an analyst and being in sports media is, creating narrative and storylines. But what's your personal thoughts on this whole buildup of these two?
What was that? 2023? Caitlin Clark coming in, sharpshooter, Angel Reese, like two completely different positions. Right. So how is that even comparable, right? So we can take that off the list to pin these two players against one another, right? But I think it goes back, and I hate for it to be about race, but it goes back to not even black and white, right? It goes back to palatable black women. Angel Reese is not palatable. She is not for everybody, right? She is not that stereotypical, pleasant, like she's just not for everybody. She's gritty, right? She's down to earth, but Angel Reese, if you ever see her outside of basketball, she is feminine, she is soft, she is understanding, like almost to a point that she seems shy, right? Right. And I don't understand why people don't see that for the person and the human that she is. But I mean, if you saw me, I could say that I'm pretty palatable. I'm not for everybody. Everybody ain't for me, but I am a different person if you see me on the volleyball court. I don't play for fun. I play to win, right? So when you see me on a court, of course you're probably going to see somebody different, right? Because if you're there to have fun and I'm there to win, we probably not going to be great teammates, right? Because there has to be a standard that you have for yourself, but also playing a team sport, you have to have for your teammates. You hold your teammates accountable just the same. So I think that whole issue with Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, I think it was strictly about race. Because again, there is nothing that equates that makes them equal other than they both play basketball. They play a different position. They have different roles on the team. They play on different teams. I mean, LSU was gritty, hardcore, and then you come from Iowa where they shoot half court and you know what I mean? Like they're not physical. They're not known to be physical. LSU is known to be physical. You've got South Carolina known to be physical. So two completely different games, two completely different coaches, mindset, players, everything. But I think when you look at where Caitlin Clark went to school, Iowa, they may have loved that, right? She's the darling in Iowa. Mm-hmm. But Angel Reese coming from LSU, that's an expectation. She had to play that way because four of her other teammates are playing that way. So I think that double standard for both of them, I think it had a lot to do with where they're from and what environment they started their career in. And it just followed them, which I hate that for Angel Reese because I think she gets way more criticism than she ever does accolades for how successful she's become. Her game has improved exponentially.
I agree with that.
And they don't, nobody's talking about that, right? But there's reels and memes of her missing layups. How about we say, okay, that's her rookie season. She's gotten exponentially better, right? Caitlin Clark, haven't heard much from her. Is she a sharpshooter? I mean, they deaded the situation where she was like, what, 3 for 40? It was something insane where she hit a dry spell in her shooting and
Right.
nobody talked about it, right? Because that wasn't the idea, or that wasn't the perception of who Caitlin Clark was. Caitlin Clark can't have a dry spell, so we're just not going to talk about it. Whereas Angel Reese can miss 2 layups in a game but score 24 points. We're not going to talk about it, right? So I think that was a double standard for both of them. Unfortunately, I mean, Caitlin Clark did a lot for women's basketball,
It
but
did.
we can't negate the fact that I mean, who her favorite player was, but we've got Asia, we've got so many other Kelsey Plum. Like, I love Las Vegas Aces, right? Becky Hammon does a phenomenal job, but all of that was taken away by this pitting two female athletes against each other, Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. And I think it's just super unfortunate, but I'm guessing if eyes are on women's basketball, I mean, it's good, but I really, it was really, really unfortunate. I would sit here and watch games and I would just be so upset. Like, even what happened with the Chicago Sky and coach Teresa Withers, like so many things were happening with that team that it really was the focus on Angel Reese, and I think it was definitely some unjust criticism that was thrown her way, and I think it had heavily to do with race, unfortunately. So, I just wish that people would talk about her successes more than they talked about her failures, because I think that had everything to do with what she looks like.
I think the race narrative, I think that's kind of like low hanging fruit, right? It was
It
kind of
is
easy to grab upon, easy storyline. It was going to be a clickbait narrative, and I think it's just taken off and just ran with it. I think Caitlin Clark is absolutely a phenomenal basketball player. I think she's took a team of her and uh, 4 other players. I mean, there was a team, but I think they were more so in the overachieving market.
for sure,
And
for sure,
so,
agreed.
I think there was a spotlight that came with that. And she has a big following, especially with Iowa, like you said, just kind of being the darling of college basketball. And I think you have Angel Reese, who is playing at LSU, whose predominantly team is majority
Mm-hmm.
all black, and it's just easy to kind of pit that narrative against each other. But like you said, they play different positions, they have different games. Angel Reese plays hard. She
She
is a
does.
double machine. Now, is her game the most aesthetic pleasing? Not
No.
necessarily, but at the end of
No.
the day, she gets the job done, and that's what counts. But I think from a standpoint of Angel Reese, I think she's may have, if she could go back, I think she's said some things in the media that she probably would take back. And I think that's just out of frustration. And I think the frustration has come because her name is always attached to Caitlin Clark. It's not just Angel Reese and what
Mm-hmm.
she's doing and what she's done. It's always Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark. But when you mention Caitlin Clark, it's not necessarily always mentioned with Angel Reese. It's about her drive shares, her market value, and
Yep.
the value that she's bringing to the women's game. And Angel Reese was, I think she had a quote where, don't quote me here, but what she was talking about, well, basically Caitlin Clark ain't the only one that's bringing viewership to women's basketball. And I think she had another quote where she was, embracing being the villain. And I think that just fed even more into the narrative of, kind of like, good cop, good player, bad player. And
Yep.
just kind of fed more into the narrative of what's, driving the media. And, if the media, if they since
If they
if
get
they
it,
sense something that's successful and people are clicking and buying into it, they're going to add more fuel to the fire. And sometimes it's unfortunate because those labels and stories stick with you,
yep.
but they're just marketing what consumers are taking in. And so
And
I
I think
think mhm.
I think Angel Reese, I honestly don't think she would take back anything she said. I mean,
Mhm.
if you talk to her, I think she was accurate in saying she's not the only athlete in women's basketball bringing in viewership,
Yes,
right?
I agree.
Because with Caitlin Clark's story and her presence and her game is is new, right? To the game of women's basketball, right? You've
Mm-hmm.
got a sharpshooter in men's basketball with Steph Curry. Steph Curry changed the game because now you got 12 and 14-year-olds out here shooting from half court thinking that that's like fundamental basketball, right?
Right.
Absolutely not. But Caitlin Clark brought that style of game to the women's game. She's a sharp shooter. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not something that you have seen because women's basketball has become physical. When was the last sharpshooter that you saw in college women's basketball? She's the only one. She literally is
Ayahuasca,
the
girl out
only
of New
one.
York, is a sharpshooter.
Oh, I mean,
Sabrina.
Sabrina,
Yeah.
you,
Ayahuasca, yeah.
she is a sharpshooter. I'm talking about bringing that to the college game. Sabrina didn't make a name. She came into the league and she was just as dominant. She was just as much of a sharpshooter. But you
Right.
got Caitlin Clark shooting at a high percentage from all over the court. I mean, her release is quick. So it was something new to talk about, right?
Right.
Like Sabrina's coming off screens, popping up shots. Like that's a standard game, a standard strategy, especially in women's game. But Caitlin Clark, she coming, she dribbling off, and she shooting, and she popping them from 30. Like that's not something that I've seen. I transitioned Caitlin Clark's game back to Steph Curry's game because
Mm-hmm.
Steph Curry, me watching him is frustrating because he takes the most ill-advised shots and he makes them. And this is like, okay, so now we see again 12 and 14-year-old boys thinking that they can make those shots when they don't even, I mean, they need to it looked like they shoot a medicine ball, right? So
Right.
Caitlin Clark came and transitioned that same game to the women's game. And now you got 12 and 14-year-old girls thinking that they're sharpshooters, right? You see what I'm saying? Everybody is going to be physical. Angel Reese, physical. This is why there is zero reason why they should be pinned against each other because they play a vastly different game. I think race was brought into it when they did the whole hand gesture because how dare, oh, Angel Reese is being a thug, then Caitlin Clark should get the same criticism because she actually started it, right? So it's like tit for tat. What are we doing at this point, right?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, it's the same gesture. And now analysts are on TV comparing the gesture and like she meant it this way as opposed to Angel. Like it was ridiculous.
Right.
So I
Right.
don't think that Angel Reese would take back anything she said as far as, she's not the only one getting clicks because I watched basketball to root against Caitlin Clark and to root for Angel Reese. I still watch basketball, right? So at the end of the day, Angel Reese was right in saying what she said about, she's not the only one bringing viewership. And
Mm-hmm.
right now, again, Angel Reese's game is quietly improving match and game after game, whereas Caitlin Clark is out with a groin. So now she's not the hot topic, right? You're coming in and you're looking at Paige Buckets being a hot topic, what she doing for Dallas. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of other women are starting to be on the media pipeline because Caitlin Clark is out with an injury, right? And her game isn't going to transition because we're talking Caitlin Clark, Sabrina Ionescu. I take Sabrina, right? We're looking at different comparisons now, and that is in part by that controversy between Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. But I think Angel Reese's game is vastly improving night after night. So I'm excited to see it, and I love seeing all the positivity now. And she needs more of it, but Angel Reese is doing her job night in and night out, and I appreciate it. Even though she plays for the Chicago Sky, and that's a questionable organization. So,
Now,
love
speaking
to
of
see it.
speaking of narratives, right? You have a lot more athletes, like the podcast that we're on. You have a lot of male, a lot of female athletes now that are starting to try to create their own narratives out in the media space to try to take back the power away from journalists and other media pundits who, are able to kind of create the narrative that may not be true, but just may make headlines and may just kind of be clickbait for people.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what we have now, we have a lot of minorities in the media space, a lot of minority athletes. You have Cam Newton, Ryan Clark, you have Paul George, you have Pat Bev, you have all these athletes that are in there. But it seems like now, and it's more so, or maybe it's just my attention, but amongst minority and Black media, there's a lot of conflict. And it seems, I don't know if it's conflict for entertainment, but it seems like when there's a disagreement of opinion, it's like we go to instantly trying to discredit one another.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about Cam. Let's talk about Cam and Ryan Clark. Or you could pick, but what is it about in the black media space that we always have to attack each other just because we can't agree on a common opinion? Everything is subjective, except when you start talking about stats and things like that. But like everything's subjective when you giving your opinion about something or your criticism about something. I think the latest argument that Cam and Ryan Clark were talking about were Jalen Hurts. Is he a top 10 quarterback?
Okay. I mean, that conversation I thought was absolutely ridiculous. and that and let's go back to kind of minorities I mean, we're all minorities anywhere we go, right? In these spaces, right? So it is about I feel it's about having each other's backs a little bit, right? Respecting the opinions, but also at the bare bones know that, like, bro, I know this was hard for you to get in this space because it was hard for me to get in this space. So we can have a difference of opinion, but let's respect that, right? Let's not look like we're fighting each other on air just because we have a difference of opinion, right?
Right.
I think that comes from not understanding the space that you're taking up, right? And I mean, like, for Cam, I think that media is new for him, right? Because he wasn't always on the favorable side when he was a quarterback
Right.
with Carolina. He was criticized all the time. So now what's the saying? The hunted becomes the hunter. Now Cam is on the flip side of critiquing other people. And it's like, okay, are you projecting a little bit because Jalen Hurts plays the same position you're playing? So, like, absolutely Jalen Hurts is a top 10 quarterback. What does that even mean? What's the discussion? That's not even a debate for me. Yes. Philadelphia Eagles comes from a long list of highly touted quarterbacks from the Eagles, beloved by all fans. Like, his story like, what are we talking about,
Right.
right? So people can look at Cam and be like, Cam, you crazy. Like, yes, like why is this even a conversation or a debate between him and Ryan Clark, right? So I think that especially in the media, when you get those shows that have these debates that center around like one topic, you can't it's no fun to all agree, right? But at the end of the day, when there are two minorities disagreeing on a situation, you got to respect their opinion. You got to dead it. You got to be professional in the way that you're like, hey, I respect if you say, if we don't agree, I respect that. Because again, it's not going to be a show if everybody agrees. If everybody said Jalen Hurts is a great quarterback and yes, he's top, then that's not fun to watch because everybody's just
Right.
sitting around agreeing,
Right.
right? But I think that when it comes to sometimes I think in the media when we're asked these questions, we're kind of pitted against one another. And I think at the bare minimum, you and I are on the show and we get a conversation, we get a question and we disagree on that topic, we at the end of the day have to sit down and say, hey, before that red light goes on, we got to agree that at the baseline, we're going to respect each other's opinion. And I think that that's where it starts. And that's when you're going in, not everybody's going to agree, but there has to be a level of respect. So in that argument, in that debate, when you see, you know, minorities in the media going against each other, I think that there is a genuine lack of respect for the other person. I sincerely do, and I think that it's super unfortunate because then that's just gonna breed more dissension in all the trolls and all the critics, and it's like now Cam and Ryan have become the topic and not what they were talking about because of this disagreement. When it's like, guys, stop giving them fuel to
Right.
add to the
Right.
fire. Just like it's okay. Like at the end of the day, I personally don't think that Ryan Clark and Cam Newton like each other. Again, Cam is not palatable. Cam comes on, he's got all this garb and get up on, and he's a different dude. And that's okay. You gotta respect that he's a different dude. Ryan Clark is a different dude. I think Ryan Clark sometimes, not gonna lie, he gets on his pulpit a little bit, right? And so not a lot of people like that. I can see that that could rub Cam Newton the wrong way. That's why I say at the end of the day, if I'm sitting next to somebody that I know gets on their pulpit, like in that situation, Cam was trying to probably knock him down his high horse, knock him off his high horse. You know what I mean? And that's like that shows on TV.
Yeah.
That's when you don't have that media training, that shows on TV. So I don't think it's necessarily about any one person putting us against each other. I think at the end of the day, we have to respect the space that we take up. And
I
I
think
don't think that, I just don't think that, I honestly don't think Cam and Ryan get along when the camera is off. So it's just like,
it,
it
it
was gonna spontaneously combust.
it wouldn't be surprising. I mean, Ryan Clark is very condescending,
Yes.
very
Yeah.
very patronizing.
Yeah.
Even when he's praising and giving peace, he's sending subliminal shots
Yeah.
in his message. I mean, but even things that don't involve Ryan Clark, he inserts himself into. I mean, he's RG3. I think that Stephen A. Smith had got into it with, I think, uh, when Rich
Gosh, what
Paul went
was
on the
it?
Pat
Yes,
McAfee
Rich
show.
Paul. Yep.
Yeah, and so he just inserted himself into a situation. You look at um, what's the cornerback play for Philadelphia? Uh,
Corner.
yeah,
I have no idea.
can't
I'll
think
have
of
to
it,
check
but
on
like
that.
it was a whole debate about what, Deion Sanders not using the T step, and he's using the T step, and so
Mhm.
I don't know, man.
And from a fan's perspective, I don't know what a T-step is. I
Me,
don't care, right? Like, what are we talking about? And that's where it's like there's so many different, and you know this as well. There's so many different personalities, and we meaning Black America, Black culture, we have a presence when we walk in a room, period, without opening our mouths, right? And so we're aware of that. We're overtly aware of the space that we take up. At least I am. I am overly aware of the space I take up. And I am aware of that in a way of knowing how to approach people, knowing how to, when I walk into a room, I feel the energy of the room. So I know how to play the game, right? I think that Ryan Clark, as an example, he, he's very condescending, like you said. He gets on this high horse. And I don't think Cam, as an example, Cam is a different personality. He's not that guy, right? Like Cam will go to the gutter if you let him. He'd even do it on TV if you let
mm-hmm.
him, right? Stephen A, he has a perspective. He has this personality. I just think that we need to honor who we are as people. And I think when that goes out the window, that's when you see the rifts. That's when you see this kind of back and forth. Pat McAfee is a great example of being culturally acceptable by just being himself. Pat McAfee is nuts. Absolutely nuts. There's absolutely zero human that is black and on TV that can act the way that Pat McAfee acts.
I agree. Asante Samuels. That's who I was trying to think of. Asante
Oh,
Samuels.
as the corner for.
Yeah, that's Asante Samuels.
But getting back to like there is nobody that is black and on television that can act the way Pat McAfee acts and get away with it. Absolutely zero. And that I don't know why that is, but Pat McAfee is who Pat McAfee is. I think that as black media personalities, we have to show up as our authentic selves. I think Stephen A does a good job of it. He gets criticism, but Stephen A, I think, is the first person to say, you know what, I messed up. My bad. My bad, dog. I think Shannon Sharp, as another example, I don't think Shannon Sharp was authentic in who he is. That's why he got what happened to him. That's all I'm gonna say. If if you show up as your authentic self, you have nothing to worry about. And I will 100% ride with that for sure.
Jen Hoffman. Man, I appreciate you coming through and blessing us on the podcast.